Hey guys, and welcome to season 3 of the Us People podcast. I'm your host Savia, and in this season I get to make my guests laugh, cry, and even make them think about life a little differently with the questions I fire over to them, which digs into their lives and professions a little differently. We even had a chance to change up the intro, giving you a fresh, new sound. I look forward to sharing season 3 of the Us People podcast with you. Let's go.
Hey everybody, this is Kenyon Farrow, writer and activist based in the United States, and you are listening to the Us People podcast with Savia.
Made up my mind, now is my time to shine. Now is my time to shine. Time that you let go, time that you let go, now is my time to shine.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Us People podcast. I'm your host Savia, and today I've got Kenyon with me, who is a writer, activist, and editor. Kenyon, thank you so much for coming on the Us People podcast. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, actually, despite the state of the world. I can't even just say the United States at this point. There's a lot going on. But, I personally am doing pretty well.
See, I have to tell it. Do you mind if I tell everyone what happened to you yesterday?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, but it's a story to tell within itself. So, Kenyon went out, he had a meal. He had a suspicion that something wasn't right with the meal. And he still managed to come on the show even though he has food poisoning. So I commend him. I commend him so much for coming on the show. And he still has a really bubbly personality to go with it. So I'm so grateful for that. And it brings
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. You are most welcome. So my first question for you is, I ask everyone this, and it's so people can get to know you as an individual, is could you tell me a bit about your life, your background, where you grew up as in family life, and also how this influenced you to be the person who you are today?
Sure. So I grew up in the U.S. in a city, Cleveland, Ohio, which is, Cleveland is in the Midwest, and it sits right on Lake Erie. So it's a city in the Great Lakes, and is known as, we talk about kind of, Rust Belt, or one of the, kind of former auto and steel, kind of industrial cities. Yeah. I think in the UK, that's what for y'all, Birmingham and Manchester?
That's it.
Right. So similar, kind of a, city of very strong working class background folks. I grew up in, we call, public housing or projects in the United States. I think y'all call it government housing.
That's the one.
I'm trying to do all my UK translations.
You're doing good.
Based on what I know, right? But I grew up in a housing project in Cleveland, and raised by a single mom. I have two sisters. And I think that the influences on, my work as a writer and an activist really come very much from my family. Yeah. I come on my mother's side of the family from a very long line of ministers in the African Methodist Episcopal Church tradition, the AME Church, and going back into the, as far as we can kind of tell, back to the at least early 19th, maybe even late 18th century, during slavery in the United States. My family were, AMEs, and a lot of men and some women were AME ministers. Now, at my kind of grandparents' generation, one of my great uncles was an AME minister, and was doing sort of desegregation work in the South. There's some famous stills and footage of, Dr. Martin Luther King with a bunch of other Black ministers, and my uncles in a couple of those shots. So I sort of grew up knowing that. And then one of my great aunts who's a registered nurse, and she was also married to an AME minister, different minister. Wow. And in the late 1960s, right, my grandmother of the three sisters was the only one who did not marry a minister, but the other two sisters did. So in the late 1960s, early 1970s, one of my grandmother's sisters, when she was a registered nurse, and my great uncle was a pastor of a church in the Bay Area in California. So this is the San Francisco Bay Area. And my aunt was one of the nurses that helped the Black Panther Party establish their community clinics in Oakland, in that era. Yeah. And my mom was, when she was very young, when she was 18, 19, before I was born, she was a member of the Black Panther Party in Cleveland, Ohio. She's not, famous of, some of the more famous people, but she was a rank and file member of the party in Cleveland. And then later, started doing, kind of organizing amongst, tenants and renters in the housing project, the government housing that I grew up in. And she also did a lot of work around the image. In the United States, there's a lot of kind of political activism about the use of particularly Native Americans in the various sort of sports teams. And here in Cleveland, the Cleveland Indians, have a pretty offensive, logo and a quote unquote mascot, but it's an actual depiction of a person. And so my mom was also involved in a lot of the work to try to get the Cleveland Indians to remove Chief Wahoo from their images. So I grew up in that context, right? And so in a household, and on both sides, even my dad's side of the family, which aren't necessarily political activists, but just very kind of think about politics and current events and debates at holidays. We like to argue about politics. So I kind of grew up in that, and grew up, having to learn a lot about history. And I think that carried through. I personally, as a kid, was way more interested in arts. I started taking dance lessons at the age of 7. I was the only boy in dance classes. And then later in high school and in undergrad, I studied theater. And so I was like, I'm an artist. I'm not going to be doing, any of this, activism or become an AME minister, which is what my grandmother wanted me to do. So, but as sort of, luck would have it, or fate would have it, I moved to New York in 1999 after I graduated undergrad. I graduated undergrad in 1997 and moved to New York in 99. And was working in, off Broadway and off Broadway shows in New York. I did some tours, did a lot of classical work. I actually really loved doing Shakespeare and Greek work. But I moved to New York about a month before a pretty well-known police homicide case in the United States, a young man named Amadou Diallo, who we were actually about the same age. I think he was 23 or 24. When he was killed by the NYPD unarmed, shot 41 times in front of his apartment building in the South Bronx in New York. And so that had happened, and a lot of police brutality work, and a lot of the stuff that a lot of the organizations that you're seeing today in the United States that have been a part of, or individuals who kind of moved on to work, say, for Black Lives Matter or other things, came out of a lot of that police brutality work 20 years ago. So I was kind of, moved to New York at a time where there was a lot going on. And this was, again, just before also, 9/11 happened. And at that point, doing another production of, Shakespeare or Greek show just didn't feel as prescient as kind of being involved in, kind of community organizing and social justice work as it was happening. And I also knew that I had a strong desire to write. And I didn't want to write for the stage or screenplays. I wanted to write essays and wanted to hone my craft there. And so, my family history won against against my own wishes. And, here I am. And in fact, I'll, close this piece with this. My mom said to me at some point, as her mom used to always say to me when I was a kid, you're going to be a preacher when you grow up. And I was like, like hell. And my mom eventually said to me, well, your grandmother was right. You may not be doing the sort of religious piece of that, but the sort of, work of, kind of writing, editing, organizing, speaking, and your activism is a part of that, that Black tradition. And, so you're doing it one way or the other. So here we are.
See, it's all, like you said, in life, things are meant to be regardless of what path you try to take. You'll always end up on the right path that you're meant to be on. So who have been the strongest influences in your life?
I think that to a large extent, kind of first and foremost, primarily a lot of women in my family have been particularly strong influences. I just sort of described my mother. And in that, one of the things I also didn't mention, like just, things that weren't necessarily, you wouldn't describe as political activism, but just a certain amount of bravery. She took in women who were being abused by their, partners or spouses, including children in our small apartment building in the projects. We harbored women. My mom took in a friend of my older sisters when they were 13. Is a young white girl my sister went to junior high school with, whose father kicked her out because she was dating a Black boy. And this girl lived with us for about a month. And so, things like that in terms of, not just being involved in the sort of bigger, policy and politics and those sort of things in big ways, but also just how you live your life in terms of taking care of people and doing what needs to be done, no matter what, is, and particularly the women in my family really have embodied that. So those things are very important to me. Those folks are important to me. I would also say Prince is a big influence.
Yeah.
I mean, as a Black gay man, and as a kid when Prince was, kind of debuted, and just seeing this person really embody a kind of a gender space that was, different, regardless of his own sort of sexual practice, was queer in a sense, right?
Yeah.
In the broadest sense of the word. And I just, he to me represented a certain amount of bravery to live in your own truth and your own body, no matter what. Yeah. And so, Prince is very important to me, and other kind of just sort of, well-known like sort of political figures. Alice Walker's work as a writer and as an activist and essayist is huge for me. James Baldwin, and then a lot of the, Black gay men who were kind of started doing, writing and cultural organizing in the United States in the 80s, the Marlon Riggs and Essex Hempels of the world, Joseph Beams, their work was very influential on me as well. I saw the film Tongues Untied when I was 14 because my mom made us watch it.
See?
As I told you, having to watch political stuff. And I came from a family that was also pretty open around LGBT issues. My parents, mother and father, and extended family, had close friends who were lesbian or gay, and nobody kept it a secret, or there was no shame involved and those sort of things. So I grew up in that context, and my mother making us watch Tongues Untied when I was about 14 years old on public television here in the United States. This must have been like 1989 or so. Also gave me a window that, there are also Black gay men who are also involved in social justice work, right? And as well as other things. So those are some of the kind of influences that I still, ride with today.
That's amazing. And that's even before we've got into what you really do.
I know. Right. We're like me at like 15, 16, right?
We haven't even touched.
We got 30 more years to catch up.
Okay, right. Let's go. Okay. So I've never really asked anybody. I have interviewed activists before, but I've never really broken down what an activist does. Could you break down? Here's a few questions for you. So I try and put them all together for you so you can get a feel of it.
Sure.
My first one would be, what is an activist? What are human rights? Do you consider yourself a human right activist? Or what do you feel you do as an activist that helps to change the world, to enable people to become themselves and be comfortable in their skin? That's a lot of questions.
Sure. So first, what is an activist? I think that an activist is, a person who kind of decides to challenge a status quo of power, right, in whatever way. And that can be done through writing, that can be done through, being involved in public protests or rallies, or, any of the number of tools that we, kind of deploy to sort of make our voices heard in, in opposition or usually in collectivity. I tend to also think of myself as an organizer, as much as an activist, if not more, because I also think kind of for me, organizing is the next step. So organizing is not just about me taking my own, using my own voice to challenge the status quo and sort of challenge, kind of power. Yeah. But I think of organizing as really trying to build infrastructure to allow collective groups of people to do as much, right? And I think that's where, I also see a lot of, usefulness in terms of just being able to, not just, show up at a protest, but also what are you building? What are the ways you are using, your activism to also build collective power, right? And to help build infrastructure. It can be organizations, it could be coalitions, it could be campaigns, it could be, but things that really give, and then developing other folks who, to develop their own sort of skills and their own sort of space as leaders, right? So you're, it's the kind of Ella Baker quote, strong people don't need strong leaders. So it's in that tradition of helping to help develop and help connect people to then leverage their own power. So I think for me, I think about myself as both like kind of activist and organizer in those ways. And then the second question was, repeat that for me, just so I have it.
The second part is, what are human rights? Do you consider yourself a human rights activist?
Yeah, so I think of human rights, I think there's sort of dual ways to think about it. I think one is, the kind of legal framework, right, of human rights, which is, ways in which often through these sort of multinational governmental organizations that, try to set the terms for how governments are supposed to kind of protect and cultivate the lives of citizens without violence, deprivation, harassment, stigma, et cetera, right? And I think, and so so there's that sort of human rights from the very kind of like legalese of sort of global activism. And do I consider myself a human rights activist? I think it's challenging in the United States.
I can only imagine.
For a couple of different reasons. So I would answer that question with saying, yes, I do. And I do believe theoretically in systems that are outside of individual countries that help try to leverage power to enforce, or to push countries to do the right thing by the inhabitants of that country, right? Yes. And, so I do believe in some sort of infrastructure that is outside of any one nation to be able to handle those things, or to collectively think about what kind of world we should be living in. Now, I think in terms of the United States, well, it's challenging because, the United States does not has not actually even signed on to a whole number of human rights treaties, treaties within that space, and yet still occupy so much of a dominant force in terms of what can happen, right, globally in countries that are not the United States, right? So just as a kind of imperial nation, right, that we skew what happens in the UN, to our benefit, right? And often means that the United States as a country, as a nation state, gets to do things without being challenged or recrimination.
Yeah.
So so I think that's one of the things that makes it challenging. And there are certainly organizations, including mine, Partners for Dignity and Rights, and some other ones, U.S. Human Rights Network, that are really working to advance a human rights framework in the United States. Sometimes I think within the context of the U.S., it's actually easier in some ways to do that without calling it human rights, but really using the ideas of, the sort of respecting the rights and dignity of people to live and to not be, deprived of, health, food, water,
yes,
clothing, housing, et cetera, because of, any number, race, class, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, disability or ability status, et cetera. So I think that I approach my work with that in mind. Even if I don't always call it that, right, within the context of the United States, because it's a very strange relationship to what we think of as the kind of human rights, like sort of global infrastructure. Although sometimes I really wish that, like, especially within the context of the last few years, like, we could actually probably use some intervention.
That's true.
Somebody to come help us. But that is, that's another story. So, yeah.
Oh, definitely. Where did your journey begin when it came to writing? Because writing is a beautiful talent to have. But when did your first experience of writing come to you, and how did you use that to let people know this is something that you want to do for the rest of your life?
I knew that I was a good writer and a good speaker as a kid. So one example, when I was in grade school, I ran for, I think, vice president of like the student council, maybe president or vice president of like my school's student council. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. Oh. And I won. And, we all the folks who won, different president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, like, whoever, the people who won those offices, we had to give speeches in front of the whole school. And I wrote a speech, at whatever age I was, thinking, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. And I remember giving it to the teacher or whatever. And I remember the day I read it, right, when we had to read our speeches, in front of the school. And the response from the adults in the room was shock and awe. And my mom, and they actually had me. So then after we read it, I had to then, kind of rewrite it because my handwriting is really terrible. And like they packaged it in like a thing. And I remember my mom just being completely stunned. And then my mom was, one of those moms, like I had to then do the speech in front of family at like Thanksgiving, like holidays or, whatever. So I knew then that I had a talent for writing and speaking, but it didn't really, because I was also a very shy kid. I was completely shy. So that told me that I had something there. Now, moving forward, once I kind of got to high school and in undergrad, I also knew that I could write well because I would like write term papers at the last minute. I mean, I would literally like barely be able to spell check them before I printed and then like ran the class with it. And I remember once in college, I had a professor, Akbar Mahdi, who I still am connected to. He taught sociology when I was an undergrad. And it was a paper that I like literally, it was like a 5-page paper that we had to do, response to some reading. And I, again, hit the spell check, make sure there were no spelling errors, and printed it and like dashed to class. So when he handed the papers back, I got an A- on it. And he wrote on it, he's like, Kenyon, I can tell that you did this like at the last second, and but you happen to be such a good writer that had you actually, taken a breath and actually like proved this a little more, just like fixed a couple things, this would have been an A+ paper. Yeah. So that was like the thing. Now, when I started to write really professionally, I think the first time I realized that this was something that I wanted to do was when I read James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. It was reading that book when I was also an undergrad at some point. And I read it not because it was assigned. I found it at like a used bookstore for 75 cents or something. So I bought a copy of it and read it, and I was like, oh, you can do this? Like you can, you write a letter to your, niece and nephews and like use it to talk about the United States and where we are and what's happening. And it was pretty, it was a new experience for me, even though I was always a strong, an avid reader as a kid. Yeah. And that was really when I knew that like, this was something I wanted to actually try my hand at. So that was kind of the impetus. And once I moved to New York in 99, as I said, I started to do more social justice work in the early 2000s. I knew I wanted to start kind of writing, the things that I was involved in. And so a good friend of mine at the time, who was a journalist here in the United States, Kai Wright, currently doing some stuff for NPR. I had reached out to Kai, who was an editor at a New York City sort of public policy publication called City Limits. Yeah. And I wanted to write a piece about some of the work I was beginning to do, which was kind of challenging the criminalization of LGBTQ youth of color in the West Village, as the neighborhood was gentrifying and the sort of new white folks moving into the neighborhood, moved there for the legend of the village, but then didn't like all these Black and brown, queer kids, me included, who hung out in the West Village at the time. So I started to call the cops on people for ridiculous things. So I wrote about that, and Kai edited it, and I got it was my first paid job as a writer, and I knew that then I wanted. So I went from that to starting my own blog, and then going to a graduate school for journalism, because I knew that I wanted to do more than just like be a blogger. I wanted to actually, and there's nothing wrong with being a blogger, but I wanted to learn how to report stories. And even if I, worked still as an essayist or whatever, I wanted to have that skill set, and be able to play at that level. And so I went back, to grad school. And once I was finished, then just, for, the next now, I think 13, 14 years later, to, kind of marry my sort of social justice work with my, writing and editing and that work as well.
Wow, it's amazing. In your opinion, what makes a good writer to you? What elements make a good writer?
I think the first thing is storytelling. It's the ability to, writing is so much about having a point of view about the world, and being able to tell that story, right? Yes. And so I think that's just like the strongest first thing, is being a good storyteller. And then the second thing, I think, is being able to me, my favorite writers are people who also there's a certain bravery in what they do. And sometimes that bravery is about form, right? It's about, they've really done something different with the form of, novel or essay or whatever the thing is. But also bravery in terms of what they're willing to sort of take on, topic wise, right? So, and also sometimes charting new ground is something I often tell, writers who ask me, what I, how to become a writer, what to do, and I often say, and this is true to me, I think, of whatever profession you're interested in, know the people who came before you.
Yes, I agree.
Know that legacy and know where you are situated in that legacy. And you don't have to, unless like in situations like this, I will talk about, Baldwin and Essex Temple and other writers, or Alice Walker, as people who, bell hooks, people who really inspired me to write. But you don't have to see yourself necessarily as like, I'm, the next so-and-so, right? I think that's actually fairly limiting. I think that limits you, and you end up kind of trying to parrot somebody else's work or how they sound, as opposed to doing your own thing. But it's important to know the lineage through which you come. And then also to go and to be willing to go away from the pack, right? So I will tell people too, like, sometimes it happens where, editors or people will approach me about, writing certain things for publications. And if I don't have anything new to say about it, I'm at this point blessed enough to not, necessarily need the cash that like where I'm like, okay, look, I gotta get this check, so I'm just gonna do it. But and even then, even when I was really broke, I still would say no to things that I felt like if it had already been said, what I would say about something had already been said. I'm not going to repeat it, right? I'm not going to. I feel like I've had people reach out to me. Oh, you write? I'm like, I have looked up everything, like kind of what's out there now. And this person or a couple of people really kind of said what I would say. I don't have anything new to say, so I'm not going to say. But if I have something new to say, or sometimes I say, well, let me look and see what's been said. And then if I find something new to say, I will then say it. So some of it is like going in a different direction that way. And then also just picking up topics or things that like people are not doing, right? So part of I would say the last 10 years where I really worked very solidly in, not just HIV, but also public health. And I wanted to learn. And even when I went to grad school, I studied like health and medicine reporting because, I didn't want to just, I felt like being able to actually write about health and science issues in relatable ways is a skill that not a lot of people I knew had, right? Who I think are strong writers, but who couldn't necessarily do that. And as I have said before, like I was like a young theater gay. The idea that I would like become I'm kind of known as somebody in public health who has like subject area expertise. I laugh every time it happens, or I write about something fairly technical and geeky because I barely got through chemistry class. And I think I only passed because the professor, my teacher in high school, thought I was like a nice kid. And and that I was great at so many other things. I was very good at kind of English and humanities and history and that lane of things. And I was, known as an actor and a dancer in the school. I had all these, but science and math, So I say that to say, but then I got very interested in public health because I got interested in HIV because of how it was impacting my community. And so sometimes you don't know what is going to lead you where. But I knew once I started to get involved in, kind of HIV activism in the United States and writing about it, that there weren't that many Black people as either activists or as kind of health and science writers who could write about, everything from science and research to, regulatory issues with how drugs come to market or drug pricing or intellectual property issues. And the kind of finer points of our trash healthcare system in the United States. So I wanted to do that. And I knew that there weren't that many. And even, recently in my last job at thebody.com, when we would go to like the International AIDS Conference or even domestic research conferences, I would often be the only Black journalist from the United States in those spaces, right? One or two of us, right? Yeah. in terms of covering science. If there were other, Black folks, covering sometimes from the UK or from French or from, Caribbean or African publications, but from the United States, there almost no science and medical journalists in that room, except for me. So that's a long way to say, go where there aren't a lot of people sometimes.
Yes.
And it can feel lonely in senses you feel like, nobody gives a damn what I'm doing, but it will pay off. It may take a while, but it'll pay off in ways than just kind of doing what I see a lot now, to be frank, which is just, people jumping on every
bandwagon
dumb thing a celebrity says and writing a think piece about it. And yeah, you can get a lot of Twitter followers that way. You can, get a famous person to retweet you, saying something kind of snappy about this, that, or whatever. But, be a little bit deeper than that.
Yep.
It'll last longer.
I'm telling you, I agree with you there. And it actually leads me to my next question for you, which is, what do you feel is the best and most emotional piece of writing that you feel you have written and been connected to?
Wow, the most emotional piece of writing. Something I think about to write right now. I actually think, I actually don't think the most is out yet. It's something that I just started working on the last week. So, story. So I just recently moved back to Cleveland, Ohio, after being gone for 21 years. And I decided 2 years ago I was going to probably move back home. So it wasn't just because of coronavirus and, being in New York, which was the first place hit. But, that was happening as I was about to move back to Ohio. So I picked Cleveland Heights, which is a suburb of the city of Cleveland, which is a very kind of thought of as a kind of a politically progressive and a borderline kind of hippie. Hippie suburb, which is kind of my lane. So it is what it is. But
I like it.
So I'm a little bit of a hippie. So I by the time I started high school, we lived here. And also I ended up purchasing my first house on the same street that my grandfather owned a house when I was a kid. So it's a dead end street. My grandfather, and every other thing I looked at fell through except this house. So it was kind of meant to be. Yeah. And so it was very emotional for me to move back here, because it was so grounding to move back again to a street that I knew well, because my granddad lived on the street, and be back home and a number of things like that. Now my neighborhood is about 50-50 Black folks and Jewish folks, and primarily Orthodox Jewish folks. Cool, right? So and there's a number. There's a Hebrew Academy and a couple of synagogues, things in the neighborhood. That's all good. So, but about a week and a half ago, my neighbor directly across the street, Orthodox Jewish family, older folks, put a Trump Pence sign in the lawn, and I all but had a complete meltdown.
I can only imagine, honey. You look stressed now.
I was like, where the hell have I landed? Like, you could not have imagined, based on my just growing up in Cleveland Heights or my experience here, like whatever, you could not have told me that anybody in this suburb would even if they quietly thought it, would be bold enough to put a Trump Pence. And then like after that went up, like two other houses a little further down the street put up Trump Pence. Now almost everybody else is either, Biden Harris, or they have like Black Lives Matter signs on their lawns, or they have, like other political things that are not that. So I felt unsafe. I felt almost betrayed, because here I was at the same time beginning to think, given everything that's happening in this country and Donald Trump helping to kind of embolden a number of white nationalists, militias, and kind of neo-fascist, neo-Nazi organizations who do not like Jewish people. Right?
Exactly.
And in fact, I mean, even, and, you folks may be aware in the UK of, some of the, murders of black people that have happened either through the police or through these vigilantes around the country, or who have killed white people who were at Black Lives Matter protests or things like that. There also been a couple of cases of some of these white nationalists actually, like one in Pittsburgh just 2 or 3 years ago. A guy went into a synagogue in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it's only about a 2.5 hour drive from Cleveland. So same region of the country, but, shot up a synagogue, killed all these people. So I'm like, how does it make this make sense to me? Right. And, I was really struggling this last week about what to think, what to do about it, and I cried about it. It was really, I had a real problem. So the thing that kind of what I came to was, I actually had a dream one night. I was really wrestling with this, and it was actually, believe it or not, it was Alice Walker in my dream.
Hey.
Who said to me, I've actually been watching a couple of a friend of mine who is a big Alice Walker fan. He's been sending me a bunch of talks that she gave in the last year. And so part of it, that was in my head. So I've been watching, and what she said to me in my dream was, you have to focus on what is in order to kind of to feel like you have some power to kind of engage this, right, and not feel totally powerless. Yes. Is not to excuse it at all or to kind of make excuses, but really sit with what is the level of fear and stuff of that nature that is going on for them, that would feel like the safe choice for them. Like, you have to really sit with the kind of suffering, though you may not agree with it, that must be present for that level of dissonance to be there. Yes. Right? And that made me feel a little bit better. It at least gave me a sense of like, okay, all right, I need to kind of do that. And also because I just moved, I bought this house, I'm not moving. I have to figure out how to engage I'm going to be in the community, right? And so I was really struggling with it. So what I did was, so I don't want to sound so high-minded that I also am not petty. So I went and bought a little lawn sign of my own, which are around, you can see them a lot in my neighborhood and around the country, with these signs that are like, in this house, we believe, Black Lives Matter, love is love, no human is illegal, women have a right to choice. It's like kind of a list of things like that.
I love that.
And I put it directly across, like, from there, like Trump pin sign. So I did that. I felt a little proud of myself in that moment. But so last night, I came home and there was a note on my front door. And so I pulled the note, come in the house, and I look at the note, and it's right here. Okay. And it's this. I'll just read it to you. Hello, neighbor. We live right across from you and see you every once in a while. We're also new to the neighborhood. We like your sign with a little smiley face. Making adult friends is hard, and we were wondering if you'd like to be friends. You're welcome over for dinner or hangs anytime, XO, and then the names of the two neighbors. Yeah. So they're the house next door to the Trump pin sign, and they put their address, and then they said, we're at, blah, 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 my street, not the Trumpies next door. So I had already decided I was going to write about this. Yeah. Because I was like, I need to put this in, in that format. But this, I read this last night and I cried, right? Oh. And I cried because it made me it was like I felt all of a sudden like I actually did belong where I am.
Yeah.
I did make a wrong decision, and that there are other people in the neighborhood who see me, and they're white folks too. They may be Jewish, I'm not sure, but I've seen them before. But I know, but it spoke to me about like the need we have sometimes to find community where you are, even in places where that may feel challenging, or in this case, like I said, I had a range of assumptions about everybody in this neighborhood that I like clearly misread. But to then have people see that and acknowledge, we see you, right, and we want to be community. Made all the difference to me. So that's a long answer to say, once I finish this piece, and once I publish it, I will send it to you.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think I tend to write more, and it's something I'm pushing myself to, because I'm very much two things. I write mostly about the kind of political landscape of the world, and it's not always from a personal. It's my opinion about things, but it's not necessarily the most like personally exposing work. And I'm also like, I'm a hardcore Scorpio, and so we don't like
you're a
that.
Scorpio, okay.
Oh, and if you are into astrology,
I am very
folks who are
much.
listening,
Yeah.
I have multiple planets in Scorpio, so I'm a Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars in Scorpio, right? Capricorn rising.
Oh,
So
that's
it's
me.
hardcore.
Okay, so you're a Capricorn. So you're me when you're rising in the morning.
Yes, I'm right. Yeah, my rising is Capricorn. So I say that to say that, like, Scorpios are known to that. We're not the most. We don't like a lot of like self-disclosure. We want to know your business and all of it, but we're not like the most.
You know what? That's true, because my really, really close friend, I won't say his name, but my really, really close friend, his birthday is November the 4th. And he's very much like that. He's very, close, very introvert when it comes to disclosing information. But he'll be all up in yours.
Oh, yeah, we will get to it. Let me tell you. It's like, people joke like Scorpios are the detectives of the zodiac. We pull away layers, and we will not relent until we get to the bottom of things. But we do not like that level, and we will do that for ourselves internally. You're not gonna know about it.
See, I had to do that to him to make him understand that what he does to other people, because he's like, no, I can do it because I'm good at it.
Typical Scorpio.
It's the confidence. I love it. It's a confidence thing also, and it's a self-love thing too.
Yeah, for sure. And I am, for a number of reasons, personal and just in terms of where I'm trying to grow my writing. Yeah. I'm pushing myself to kind of be more self-revelatory in the work in that way. So
I love that. What is the best advice you have ever received from somebody, and what have you done with that advice in your life, throughout your life?
Oh, wow. Two things come to mind. One, my acting coach and mentor from undergrad, Elaine Denny. Yes. Hi, Elaine, if you hear this. She used to tell us every year there was a graduating class, when we were in college. She would always say, don't be amongst those people who will graduate and say, well, that's it, I'm done. I'm done with learning. I don't have to read books anymore or be curious about the world, past, present, or future, or whatever. Like, this is like the beginning. You are you should be really open to exploring and learning, right? A lot of things. And that was huge advice for me, and still means a lot to me to this day, and part of how I live. And another piece of advice by somebody who I also kind of worship, who is no longer with us. And I read this quote in a book about her, in a biography, but Lena Horne. Lena Horne once said, always be smarter than the people who hire you.
That's very true. I agree with that. I so agree with that. Yeah.
That goal, right. That, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I totally agree with that one. I might have to get that written on my wall somewhere.
Right. Yeah. It's really it's the thing.
When was the last time you tried something new for yourself?
I am doing, this is another like kind of future thing I'm doing now. I'm Monday, in a couple of days, I start voice lessons.
Ooh.
I'm a music nerd. Music is the thing that I love the most. It's the thing that I geek out about the most. Even when I was a kid, I was the kid who, not just got the Prince albums as I was talking about or whoever I was listening to, but I read liner notes. I wanted to know who played on the record, how it was produced, where it was, what the artist had to say about it, like the lyrics. I looked at all that stuff. So, but it's also been the thing that I have been the most afraid to do.
Why?
It's very. Say again.
Why? Why? Yeah.
It is. I can get up in front of thousands of people and run my mouth without notes.
That's the scorpion in
you. Right. But singing, it just has a different, and I was always afraid of it. Now, I've been in situations, even as a theater person, right? Like singing was the thing I was like terrified to do. I pushed myself and did some musicals, and I would have either people, even to this day, who, even recently my ex said to me, he was like, we were in a car and he was like, you were just singing without me paying attention. You thought I was asleep. And you really, you have some talent. Like you need to stop acting like you don't. So I know that it's there, and I'm gonna push myself to really engage it for the first time at soon to be 46 years old. So
you don't look it. So
thank you.
I would say embrace your talent, because if you've been given a talent, don't waste it.
Very, very true.
So that's definitely something. What would you do differently if nobody was judging you at all? So if judgment wasn't in the world, what would you do differently?
I think it's the piece about more writing that was more kind of self-revelatory in ways. One of my dear friends, who's a writer, musician, filmmaker, he's kind of a savant in that way. His name's Brontes Purnell. So Brontes, and I always tell Brontes, you are the only person on the planet whose career I'm jealous of.
Aww.
and it's only because he's so bold. He's so bold in his work, and he will say anything and be self-revelatory about a lot of things that are very personal and that are sometimes hard or difficult. But he will, and he's in a way that's just very irreverent, right? His way of expressing himself, and like I said, he works in a number of different media, I'm just super impressed by how his ability to just put it out there, right? And but it's like art. It's not just mess for mess sakes. It's actually really, I think quite intelligent, and it's like that piece that I'm If you talk to me, we get on the phone or we talk, I'm a mess. I always say, I'm like, Lord, if my DMs or my text messages or my conversations with my friends in any of those venues, if those are ever leaked, my career's over.
Oh, but what you been saying?
They're gonna be like, what a Who hates all of y'all? But so, sort of joke, sort of. But honestly, I think, but the piece for me is really what I would do different, and again, where I'm growing into, is really pushing myself in my work to be, more willing to go there around my own personal life and history and struggles. And in ways that I think are useful, because I also think that there's kind of a thing right now where everybody, I feel like this is especially true for Black writers, and particularly right now for Black gay male writers, that there seems to be a kind of a, people want us to write about all the trauma and pain and homophobia and racism and violence and all of that. There's a real, it feels like industry-wide, like, and this is not about any of the individual writers, some of whom are friends of mine who I think have published beautiful books, right, that I think are really useful and quite good. But I feel like the industry is like, yes, the Black gay confessional, that's the thing, right? And so, so I'm in a weird bind where I both kind of have a critique of how the industry sort of wants that kind of like, porn, that sort of self-revelatory trauma porn from Black gay men in particular, but also, know that, like, just for my own growth, there's some space in that I have to kind of also move into. So I'm kind of walking that line right now.
See, I like that. At least you know your pathway and you know what direction you have to go in to enable you to evolve as a person. So for me, that's a good thing. I believe we are not defined by our job roles or our titles, but by the kindness in our hearts. What do you believe that you were defined by as an individual?
Wow. I think I'm defined. So there are two. There's, I think, where I'm defined myself, and then I think kind of how my people sort of see me in the world are a little different sometimes. But and I think it's that. I think for me, what defines the things that define me to myself are, a kind of a relentless pursuit of knowledge and truth. I have a weird, like, I'm always curious about things, and every time I will invest chunks of time, like, I just will get it in my mind based on something I read or saw or whatever, and I'm like, I'm really interested in learning about, like, this thing, right? Yes. And we'll start to buy books and watch documentaries and read news articles, like, and academic papers about a particular thing that I geek out on, right? And then once I'm and then I'll start writing about those things, and then I'll move on to something else, like another set of things. So I have a certain kind of like thirst for knowledge, and always trying to gain new insights into the world that I seem to not be able to shake. I think that's a big part of what defines me. And also, I do think, despite my kind of earlier joke, I do think I have a very deep love of people, and I am generous with my time, probably to a fault. I think those things define me. I think that how I think I am sort of interpreted by the world, people who read my work or who, know me as a political activist or whatever, is saying the sort of truths that other people are finding a hard time either articulating, like finding the hard time. A lot of people who read my stuff, some have said to me, like, I was feeling a thing and I had a hard time articulating what it was until I read this thing you wrote, and you you helped me identify the unease I had about a particular thing, right? And help me then figure out how to navigate my way through it, right?
Yeah.
So that I mean, that's I appreciate that. So I kind of, there's that, and then or people who just are like, yeah, I was afraid to say this set of things about whatever political topics in the world, and you really like went there, and it. So I think, those, I feel like that's kind of how people respond to me, and how they sort of see me as a figure.
I like that. Definitely. Hey, I've got 2 more for you. And my
Sure.
second to last one is, what would you like your legacy to be in the world when you decide to cross over? How would you like people to remember you?
Wow. I think I would like people to remember me as a good writer, as like a committed, I was going to say committed like social justice activist, but it's actually sort of beyond that. It's like a commitment to wanting humanity to do better for itself and to be better to each other in a way. And that, probably I think this is like kind of in my head seeing my epitaph right now. I think probably to a fault, that's my editorial on it, but like to a fault, try to, I think, foreground, particularly as my work as a, as an activist or organizer, strategist, made sure that the work took center stage, even if it meant I didn't get seen or the credit for the thing, right? Because I do think, I just said this to one of my best friends the other day, and he sort of poo-pooed it, but I said, listen, I understand the kind of figure that I am, and I think that I am going to be the kind of person that and it's not that I haven't had some level of attention and focus. I mean, hell, you talking to me right now.
Yeah.
Come on. So it's not like I haven't had that, but I think that there is to an extent, when I die, people are going to figure out, oh, he did that too.
Yeah.
Oh, he was behind, or he helped, or he was the person who introduced these people, or he was like, push them out front to like make this happen or whatever. I think that those things will not come together until probably after I'm gone. For the full, I think, understanding of the totality of like what I've tried to do with my life will be clearer to people, I think, in ways that sometimes I don't feel like are always clear now.
No, I understand that. But you have a good concept of how you believe your life will be afterwards. Do you believe that people will not necessarily fame, but you will become more well known once you pass away? Because usually that happens so often.
Yeah. And I think that's essentially what I'm saying is I think it's going to be true.
Yeah.
I do think that will be true. And it's I have tended to gravitate both in my personal life and to a lot of the people that I respect and look up to in the world who are doing a bunch of different things. I really ride for underdogs. And I think I feel like an underdog a lot of the time. I think some of my friends would question whether I should, or whether whether I am actually an underdog, but I feel like that. And so a lot of people that I really admire, the people who I really, admire in certain ways are also kind of underdogs, or who kind of have been influential, but kind of flown just under the radar, right? Just like, the sort of people who know, and then are just kind of under. So, yes, I do think that will be true for me in some level. I think probably when I pass, certain things will make more sense to people about, the fullness of the life I've lived and what I've done and what have you.
I love it. My final question for you is, where can we find you in all your social medias? And if anybody would like to get in contact with you, just like I did, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so all my social medias are really just my name, at Kenyon Farrow. There's no, no trick handles or URLs or nothing too cute. It's just
nothing too
and that
cute.
is my birth name. I've had people who really thought that was a pen name or a name I made up. No, my name is Kenyon Rashawn Farrow. So yes, if you just really Google my name and you can hit me up on all the socials, or my website, which is kenyonfarrow.com. There's a way to email me directly there. And I don't have no agent. I don't have no booking. I don't have no, it's all me running this thing. I can't believe I got through this whole interview without really cursing.
You done really well, actually. I was so surprised.
Because I got a nasty mouth. And
you and me both.
Right. Another thing I got honest from my family. They're, holy and social justice, but we cursing is an art. But anyway, I
was surprised, actually.
It's all me running it.
I was quite surprised.
Yeah, you hit me up, Kenyon, you'll get me responding.
Oh, perfect. I was quite surprised that you didn't, because I always say to everyone, the first question that everyone asks me before the podcast ends, or begins, I should say, is, am I allowed to swear? And I'm like, well, yeah, that's you, right? That's
right.
So go for it. So I was quite surprised. I think you only said 2 things, and I was like, wow.
Really?
Yeah, I think.
And they were on the lesser scale of scandalous, right? Which is, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, my friends who will listen to this will be very impressed.
See. Oh dear. I want to thank you so much for coming on the Us People podcast. You've been such a great guest, and thank you for educating people today and letting them know your story from your point of view. I appreciate it.
Thank you. No, I really, I appreciate the invitation. I'm really, really grateful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the Us People podcast. And please remember, you can subscribe to Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and any other platform that you prefer listening to. Please also follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and you can also donate to the Us People podcast by simply going to the Savia Rocks website or just typing in paypal.me/Us People podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Stay happy, stay positive, and as always, please continue to be kind to one another.
Time to let it go. Now's my time. Now's my time. Time to let it go. Now's my time. Now's my time. Time to let it go. Now is the time for me to focus. Stop all that playing hocus pocus. Stop doing it yourself. You need a little help. This time I want to see you shining. I think you need a little.
Thank you so much. This was fun. Thank you. True. Yeah. Whatever that is, I know people. Yeah. When you're in your zone, you can power through a lot.
I'm gonna be okay. Made up my mind. Now is my time to shine. Now is my time to shine. Time that you let go. Time that you let go. Now is my time to shine. Now is my time to shine. Now is my time to shine. Time that you let go. Time that you let go. Now is my time to shine. Time to let it go. Now's my time. Now's my time. Time to let it go. Now's my time. Now's my time. Time to let it go. Now's my time. Now's my time. Time to let it go. You are your own worst enemy. Thinking too far, what's ahead of me? One day at a time. Just enjoy the ride. Open those eyes, see the light. Ignite that fire inside it. Let it breathe breath into life. Push all your fears to the side. Control your mind, it's all alright. Enjoy your life, the joy is mine. Commit to you, you got the tools. Everything you do, you make the rules.